Welcome to This Explainer. Right out of the gate today, we're diving into a pretty fascinating and maybe even a little controversial piece of source material. We're going to objectively unpack the 7 psychological tactics that this playbook claims can completely alter human perception, specifically when it comes to dating and attraction. We are literally breaking down how it details weaponizing cognitive biases for social advantage.
To really grasp the mindset of this material, you have to look at its core objective. The source explicitly states its goal right away, to hack her psychology so she doesn't even realize what it is that you're doing. It argues that standard pickup lines, totally useless. Instead, the ultimate aim is to bypass rational thought entirely. The promise here is that by hacking human psychology, a person can gain an unfair, almost secretive power where the target remains completely unaware that any manipulation is even taking place.
So the crucial point we really have to ask ourselves as we look at this data is, how easily can human logic actually be hacked? Keep that visceral question in the back of your mind as we step into the first phase of what the source basically frames as a psychological heist.
The source breaks down this manipulation into a few distinct tactical progressions. Let's start with phase 1, shaping your social perception. This entire phase is dedicated to building an artificially high-value persona right from the very first interaction. This all begins with a documented cognitive bias known as the noble edge effect. This is where someone is seen as more attractive simply because they're associated with helping a social cause. Now, the source instructs you to orchestrate a very specific scenario using a wingman. Instead of you bragging about yourself, your friend is supposed to loudly highlight your charitable acts, mentioning that you volunteer on weekends or go to church whenever the target is around. According to the source, this instantly flips a person's perception of you from being potentially arrogant into someone who is remarkably positive and selfless.
Building on that artificial aura, the source then applies the scarcity principle to physical objects to artificially pump up your perceived value. Specifically, it advises men to wear rare jewelry, strongly recommending a natural diamond ring. The logic here? Wearing something distinctly unique creates a calculated conversation piece that automatically sets you apart from the crowd.
To back up this tactic, the source highlights a really specific statistic regarding scarcity. Global natural diamond recovery has actually decreased by over 30% in the last 16 years, having peaked back in 2005. The source argues that by consciously wearing a finite, rare resource, the wearer inherently feels this huge surge of premium confidence, which radically alters how they carry themselves and how others interact with them.
The final trick in this first phase relies on suggestibility. This is the incredible concept that human thoughts and even long-term memories can be actively shaped just by the specific severity of the words someone uses. The source anchors this linguistic hack in a clinical study where participants watched a video of a car crash. The fascinating part is that the participants literally misremembered the severity of the crash based entirely on the vocabulary the researchers used when questioning them later. Notice exactly how the source applies this study to everyday conversation. If you use mundane words like saying 2 cars bumped or contacted, the memory recalled by the brain is pretty mild. But extreme words like collided or crashed altered the participants' memories to be much more severe. The source instructs you to swap out mundane words for extreme ones in your own stories. So, instead of saying a past event was funny, you say it was hilarious. Instead of scary, it was terrifying. The goal is to artificially make your stories, and by extension you, seem way more extreme, exciting, and memorable.
Okay, now we transition into the second phase of this playbook, bypassing rational thought. This is where the tactics shift from just passively building a persona to actively disrupting the target's logical defenses to force a specific emotional reaction.
The crucial concept here is known as the empathy gap. This describes the phenomenon where human emotions and decisions are heavily influenced by shifting between a cold, rational state and a hot, emotional state driven by things like hunger, fear, or desire. The source recommends a highly calculated tactic here to escape the friend zone. It advises approaching the target you like, but intentionally asking for her friend's number instead. According to the playbook, this artificially manufactures jealousy, aggressively pushing the target from a cold, logical state straight into a hot state of desire and confusion.
Next up is the framing effect. This is a cognitive bias where people make decisions on options based purely on how those choices are presented to them, rather than the choices themselves. The source introduces framing as a tactical tool to create the illusion of choice, completely bypassing the target's opportunity to just simply reject a date out of hand.
Let's compare a standard, what they call needy approach. Do you want to get coffee sometime?
which leaves plenty of room for a simple no with a framed approach. Should we get coffee or drinks this weekend? The hidden mechanic here is that the framed question distracts the brain by forcing it to choose between two positive options, coffee or drinks, rather than evaluating the actual premise of whether or not they even want to go on the date in the first place.
Let's move to our final section and see how this builds into the climax of the interaction. Phase 3, forcing emotional investment. This is essentially the hook and escape strategy, expertly designed to leave the target obsessing over the manipulator long after the interaction actually ends.
The first tool in this final phase is the Benjamin Franklin effect. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon where asking someone to do a small favor for you surprisingly makes them like you more. The source applies this directly to social media. It instructs you to reply to a target's story, say a picture of a trip to Mexico, and ask a favor, like requesting travel tips for your own hypothetical trip. By doing this naturally, you force the target to invest their own time and effort into helping you, which psychologically translates into them feeling more invested and attracted to you.
Finally, we reach the seventh and perhaps most jarring tactic of them all, the peak end rule. This is a mental shortcut where people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its absolute peak and at its very end, rather than the total sum of the event. The source weaponizes this rule to ensure you never look desperate or needy at the end of a date, dictating that the final memory must be entirely mysterious and abrupt. To pull this off, the source lays out an exact, three-step tactical sequence for faking an emergency exit. Step 1. During the date, text a friend to call you in exactly 5 minutes. Step 2. When they call, answer vaguely right in front of your date, saying something like, "Yeah, I'd love to meet up right now." Step 3. Hang up, give your date a quick hug, and leave abruptly. According to the material, this manufactured exit creates instant jealousy and confusion. It forces the target to wonder who you are going to see, completely overriding whatever else happened during the date.
And that brings us to the source's core promise. The claim is that by sequentially deploying these 7 psychological hacks, from the noble edge effect all the way to the peak end rule, you completely overwrite a person's natural social perception of you. As the quote says, you cease to be seen as the nice or needy guy and are artificially transformed into a highly desirable man wanted by everyone.
We've reached the end of this breakdown, and it leaves us with a rather unsettling yet absolutely fascinating thought to ponder. When human perception and emotion can be this easily manufactured and manipulated using simple cognitive biases, how much of our social attraction is actually real? It's an incredible look at the hidden mechanics of human interaction, and definitely something to keep in mind the next time someone asks you for a favor or takes a mysteriously timed phone call. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.